Hello friends, today we will discuss abstraction using interface. In my last video, I discussed abstraction in detail and how we can achieve abstraction using abstract class. In this video, I'll give you brief introduction about abstraction. Abstraction is a process of hiding the implementation detail and showing only functionality to the user. For example, when we send SMS, we just type the text and send the message. We don't know the internal processing about the message delivery. Complex details such as what happens as soon as you send the message is hidden from the user. There are two ways to achieve abstraction in Java. One is using abstract class, which I discussed in my previous video, and I'll provide a link for that video in description. Second way to achieve abstraction is using interface. Using interface, we can achieve 100% abstraction. So now let's discuss what is an interface. An interface is a mechanism to achieve abstraction in Java. Interface looks like class, but it is not a class. Interface is similar to abstract class, but having all the methods of abstract type. It means all the methods cannot have body, only method signature. But there are few changes after Java version 8 that I'll explain when I'll write a program for you all. Variables declared in interface are public, static, and final by default. Interfaces are the blueprint of the class. It specifies what a class must do and not how. There are few uses of interface. Interfaces are used to achieve abstraction. Second use of interface is that it supports multiple inheritance and it is used to achieve loose coupling. Loose coupling is a design goal that seeks to reduce the interdependencies between components of a system. Loose coupling is a much more generic concept intended to increase the flexibility of system, makes it more maintainable and make the entire framework more stable. And this is what we call the multiple inheritance. A class can implement one or more interface. So when a class implement more than one interface, it is used for multiple inheritance. An interface can extend two or more interfaces. Now let me show you an example how we can create interface and use it. So first we'll see how we can create interface. So we have to use interface keyword and interface name. So suppose I took I1 and in this we can create methods, but those methods should be abstract. So if I write here method name void show, I cannot provide method body here, only this signature I have to write. And all methods are public abstract by default. So this way we can write public abstract return type of the method, method name, and no method body. If we do not write this public abstract, then also compiler will add these two words because all the methods are public abstract by default. Now, this interface can be implemented by class. So suppose we create a class here, class name is test, and to implement this interface, we have to write keyword implements. So class test implements and interface name. So if any class implements any interface, then in that class we have to provide implementation detail of all abstract methods of this class. So here we have to provide implementation detail of this method. So void show, here we have to provide body of this method. One thing which we have to take care here, we have to declare this method as public because here we are using the concept of method overriding, And as per the rules of method overriding, access modifier of child class should be of same type or less restrictive than parent class. So public, this method is by default public, and public is least restrictive access modifier. So we cannot use here protected, default or private. We have to use public only. And here we can provide method body. So suppose here we write show, and in this here we can create main method. So suppose we create main method here. Oh, sorry. In this method, same as abstract class, we cannot create an object of this interface. So we cannot instantiate this interface. So if I write here, I try to create object of this interface, it will give us error. So if we try to create, it will give us error. We cannot instantiate interface same as abstract class, so we cannot use it. So we can create object of this class test. So we'll create object of this class test. Suppose using this we used, and using this object we can call this method. So let's save this and execute it. So here we can see we got output. So in this we have created only one method which is abstract. So before Java version 8 we could create only abstract methods in interface. In Java version 8 we can create default concrete method also. It means the method can have method body, but that method should be declared as a default void and method name. So for this method, we can provide method body here. So suppose here we give method body and we write here display. So this is allowed. But if we do not write this default keyword here, then this will give error. So we can create default concrete method also in Java version 8. One more modification is that we can create static method also. So here we can create static method also, and we can provide implementation of static method. Okay, so we can provide method body also here. So here it's allowed after Java version 8. And in Java version 9 we can create private methods also. Okay, and we can call this method using the object which we have created here. So we'll call this display method here using that object which we have created for this test class. So now let's save it and execute. So see the output of this. We can declare variable also. We can use variables also in interface. But variables declared in interface are public, static, and final by default. So if I create a variable I and I assign 20 value here, So this variable I is by default public static final. So if I write here public int, it's okay. If I write, let me write this variable again and again so I can show you different variations. So here I can create this variable as a public. If I write here just int I, okay, if I write final int I, or if I write here static int I, all these statements are identical. I can write public static final or just public static or any of the keyword. All these statements which I have written, they are identical. Even if I do not write any of these words, public static final, then also this variable is by default public static final. So compiler will add these three keywords before this variable name by default. So when I just write this statement, suppose I write this statement int I and initialize this I to some value. So by default, this statement will become public static and final. Okay. And we can use this or print this value. Suppose in this display here, we can print the value of this I. But this variable is final. We cannot change the value of this I. Okay, so here suppose I try to change this value of I to 40. Now I will get error because this variable is final. I cannot change the value of this variable. So let me show what type of error it shows. Let me save it and execute. See here, it is saying that cannot assign a value to final variable because by default this I is public, static and final. So we cannot change this value. So let me comment this and save and print this value. So here you can see the value of this I is printed. So this is how we can create an interface name, interface keyword, and interface name. Inside that interface, we can use variables, but all variables will be public, static, final by default. We can create abstract methods. Again, those methods will be public, abstract by default. In Java version 8, we can create default concrete methods also, but we have to use this default keyword compulsorily. And we can create static methods also with method body after in Java version 8. And we can use a class to implement interface, and in that class we have to provide implementation detail of all abstract methods of interface, and we cannot create object of interface, we cannot instantiate, but we can create object of the class which is implementing interface, and using that object we can call methods which are given or which are implemented in this class. Now let me show you how we can use interface to implement multiple inheritance. So suppose this there are two interfaces, one interface and it contains one abstract method show, one more interface T2 and it contains one abstract method display, and now class test1 implements both interfaces T1 and T2. So here class test can implement both interfaces. So here we are implementing or using multiple inheritance. But if a class is implementing one or more interfaces, then in that class we have to provide implementation detail of all abstract methods. So here there are two abstract methods, show and display. So in this class we have to provide implementation detail of both methods. So here we have given implementation detail of show and implementation detail of display, but do not forget to use this public keyword before this method implementation. We have to use public keyword. And then using in the main method we have created an object of this class, and using that object we have called both the methods. So let me save this program and execute. Here you can see the output of this program. Now let me show you an example where interface extends another interface. So here there is one interface TT1 and it contains one abstract method show. Now interface TT2 extends interface TT1, and this interface also contains one abstract method display. Now this class test2 implements interface TT2. Okay, so it implements interface TT2. So in this class, we have to provide implementation detail of all abstract methods of interface TT2 and interface TT1, because TT2 is extending interface TT1. So if any class extends interface 2 and interface 2 extends interface 1, then that class has to provide implementation detail to all the abstract method of interface 2 and interface 1. So here we have provided implementation detail of both the methods show and display, and created an object of this class test2, and using that object we have called method show and display. So let me save this program and execute it. So here you can see output of this program. Now let's see one more example here. In this interface, I have a variable with the name x initialized to 100, and it contains one abstract method. Now there is one more interface. In this interface also we have variable with the same name x and initialized to value 200. Now there is a class which implements both interfaces, class A and B. So in this class we have to provide implementation detail of this abstract method. And now if we want to use this variable x, refer this variable x. So if we simply print this variable as a variable x, then it will create ambiguity, because here compiler cannot decide which variable to call, because this class is implementing both interfaces and both interfaces are having a variable with the same name. So in that case we can refer that variable with the interface name. So variable which is defined in interface A we can refer as a variable interface name dot x a dot x, and the variable which is defined in the interface B we can refer as a variable b dot x. So interface name dot variable name. This way we can refer the variable which are having same name in different interfaces. So let me save it and execute. So here you can see output. If we remove this interface name from here and then we execute, we'll get error. Okay. So here you can see it is showing that uncompatible source code reference to x is ambiguous, because it cannot decide which variable to call. So we can refer it using interface dot variable name. Now let's understand the relationship between classes and interfaces. A class can extend another class. A class can implement an interface. An interface can extend another interface. Okay, a class can implement an interface, but an interface cannot implement another interface. It can extend that interface. Now let's summarize about interface. Key points of interfaces. We cannot instantiate an interface in Java. Interface provides complete abstraction as none of its methods can have body. Implements keyword is used by classes to implement an interface. While providing implementation in class of any method of an interface, it needs to be mentioned as public. Class implementing any interface must implement all the methods, otherwise the class should be declared as abstract. Interface cannot be declared as private, protected, or transient. All the interfaces, all the interface methods are by default abstract and public. Variables declared in interface are public, static, and final by default. Class implements interface and interface extends interface. A class can implement any number of interfaces. If there are two or more same method in two interfaces and a class implements both interfaces, then implementation of method once is enough. And these are few differences between abstract class and interfaces. Thank you so much.